Hello, and welcome back to our seventh Victory Tuesday edition of Skoldiers and Spice. Isn't that crazy? Who would have seen this coming? Definitely not me. Here on the Vikings First and SKOL Network, I am Sally, and I'm here to discuss a dominant yet extremely frustrating performance from Sam Darnold in the Vikings' victory over the Jacksonville Jaguars this weekend. Dustin Baker is gracing me with his presence today to discuss his thoughts on the game, the resurgence of the defense, and we're going to chat about a couple hypothetical situations involving Sam Darnold. So let's get into it. Stick with us. We are ready to go.
Hey man, how the hell you doing? I've been just fine living life with the news.
Dustin, hi.
Yo, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Not bad. Hey, that game on Sunday, I was telling my wife, this thing feels like it's gone on for 8 hours. Like, and I know
No.
I never have that feeling. I kept looking at the phone saying, God, is it like 4 p.m.? And no, every time I looked, we were right on schedule.
I couldn't agree more. When I was on your show, Vikes Now, on Friday, we were predicting both a dominant performance, and I think it was my first time in history ever predicting over 40 points from this team. And wow, I could not have been more wrong about that.
Yeah, we should have known once we got a little cocky, thinking we're playing the league's worst defense, that it was going to come back to earth and be a squeaker. That game went through so many odysseys. Like at the halftime, I was like, this kind of reminds me of last week's game against the Colts, where a couple different things could have made the game different. And then it weirdly started to feel like the Raiders game last year, where you just wanted to survive and eke out a win. And then when everything settled, I was like, just this felt like the Bears game at Soldier Field. Everything was a little weird. It was low scoring. It was fluky. So I went through a roller coaster of emotions and scenarios trying to figure out what even is this.
I mean, it was a dominant offense performance, over 400 yards. They held the ball for over 40 minutes, which I don't even know the last time that has happened. Over five
1999.
for any team or for this team?
No, for the Vikings, it's been
Oh,
25
oh.
years. Mhm.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't, and the game before that too dominated in the time of possession. They had almost 5 yards per play on average. So you were seeing everything flowing, and great game for TJ Hockenson, obviously, but the turnovers, they just couldn't get it going.
Yeah, and the Vikings aren't going to be a serious contender unless they figure out how to stop those turnovers. It really makes life easier when the defense is forcing them back, and that's the reason the Vikings have a winning record. But no team ever really tunnels deep into the postseason if they're consistently turning the ball over. On Hawkinson, to me, in addition to the obvious defensive performance, he was the Vikings would not have won without TJ Hawkinson if this game had been time machined back to like October 12th or something.
Mm.
He routinely came up with those third down catches. And in a game where a team finally figured out how to contain Jefferson and Addison, you needed somebody sure-handed in the middle of the field. And I'll be damned if that wasn't Hawkinson.
It was so beneficial to have him and Josh Oliver, two great games
Mm-hmm.
from Josh Oliver too. I want to get your thoughts. Why do you think it seems like sometimes though Sam forces the ball to Justin Jefferson? I know he's the best wide receiver in the game, so you know you can throw it up and maybe most likely he's going to come down with it, but it feels like he makes passes to him that are just it ain't going to happen.
I think it's because, as he should, he likes to go to the wishing well. One of our knocks on Cousins for a few years was just throw it to Jefferson, man. He's going to figure it out. You can be a little reckless. Well, Darnold is taking that advice, being a little reckless, and it's paying off with a negative connotation. I think you always have to involve Jefferson no matter what, and a lot of Darnold's throws are off target, not just the interception. So
Mhm.
I think we're seeing, I know we're seeing the Darnold regression. I mean, he was borderline elite, if not elite, in September. Came back to earth slightly against the Packers and certainly the Jets. And we're figuring out why this guy isn't making 40-45 mil per year. But I do have faith that he'll bounce back. The coaching staff that he has, the belief, everybody is behind him. I don't think we have any type of quarterback controversy, although that might be in your hypotheticals. You have to try to get Jefferson the ball at all times, but when they're playing like the Jaguars are playing kind of a new or at least a revised scheme to bracket Jefferson, you got to distribute it a little bit more like he did to Hockenson. And so I think he's under a lot of pressure to get the ball to Jefferson, and it was just a shitty game to do it against the Jaguars.
I was actually having the same thought about Kirk Cousins during that game because we criticized him
Mhm.
all of the time for not just airing it out or throwing to Justin Jefferson and just instead dumping the ball off these little, dink and dunk plays or taking a sack. We would be so frustrated with him. And
Mhm.
now we're seeing that and we're still not happy with it. Obviously, we're not seeing the results that we thought that we would get. But how about Kirk not stepping up and winning that game on Sunday against the Saints? It was just so delicious to see that. I loved it. Um, but yeah, as far as, Sam Darnold goes, I think that also what people aren't, I think, putting enough into is that he had so many passes those games in September that very well could have been picked off, that should have been picked off, and they weren't. So I don't know if we're necessarily seeing that much difference from him, or these defenders are just actually able to catch the ball.
Yeah, he got away with some early on, and that worked. And I think we'll find a happy medium henceforth in these final 8 games. The cool part about this Vikings season is suddenly that they only need about 2, 3 more wins to get there into the postseason. And I think that's our goal this year. We don't realistically think they're going to win the Super Bowl. But with Darnold, I've said this in a couple tweets and I say it on my show. I promise your viewers that your life can be better if you examine Sam Darnold through a lens of, a top 15 quarterback. I think we got hoodwinked in September thinking O'Connell did it again. We've polished this guy. He was misunderstood everywhere else. We got this guy. He's fantastic. And he's never going to be consistently that good. And so when I sit down or I go on a couch or I go to the games, I always view him through, all right, let's see how this goes. I don't have him to that Kirk $40-45 million standard. And thankfully, for Darnold's sake, I think he'll always have house money from Vikings fans because of the $10 million contract. But I understand the frustration when a dude throws 3 picks and no touchdowns. You start to daydream about, well, hey, could Nick Mullens do any better? But if you adjust your expectations for Darnold, we're already in a transformational season where I think the goal is just to get to JJ McCarthy. We're 7-2 while we're doing it, and I would have guessed the inverse of that record if I had to predict.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm only one win away from my apology segment here, and it's the beginning of November. I think if you take the lens you saw him in before the season started, and then
Mhm.
the one, first week of October, merge those together, and that's where you should be at. It's really frustrating for me to see that these people just basically calling for his head when yeah, it sucks to throw red zone interceptions. It does. It really does. I get it. But to your point, what's going to be better? Do you think Nick Mullens is going to come in here? You saw how he played against the Raiders last year. You saw it in person, right?
No, I wasn't at the Raider
Oh,
game,
oh,
but
okay.
I
Okay.
have. Well, I saw him multiple times in person at home, and it wasn't kind. Yeah, the proposed,
Right.
and I think this was just heat of the moment. You got to do something if you want to win this game. I don't know too many Vikings fans right now after some post nut clarity that say, "Hey, let's start Mullens." I think that for you to buy into that argument, you would take this current problem, which is interceptions by Sam Darnold, and your solution would be go get the interceptions guy who's on the bench and put him in the and
Exactly.
that's really how you would have to frame this. Now, I like Nick Mullens, like as the QB2. If Darnold hurts his hamstring or something Sunday, I love his excitement, the fact that he's not afraid. He's just like Darnold; he's
Mhm.
unafraid to throw the ball. But I think with Darnold, what we're seeing on the whole is his processing speed as a passer is not quite as good as Kirk's, but his escapability in the pocket is about 100 times better than Kirk. So we're
Yes.
we're used to this standard of living with Kirk where he's almost always going to make the right decision. And you mix it with a little bit of Darnold's budding recklessness and a guy who can move and escape, which I really like about him. But I don't foresee like this bad part of Darnold continuing. Now, if we get to Sunday and he throws 2 picks in the first quarter, yeah, we're going to be like, oh God, here we go again. But this was always going to be an experiment, probably just a 1-year one. And again, I'll reiterate, even though he had those ruthless interceptions, on the whole, he played well. He moved the sticks. That's why he ranks 12th per EPA CPOE this week alone. I mean, usually when
Hmm.
you throw 3 picks and no interceptions, your ass is down in the like the low 20s. But no, he kept that respectable. It really it bugs me sometimes watching the Vikings outside of the September games where there's always something wrong. Like if the
Hmm.
Rams game, the defense decided it wasn't going to play. And then in these last 2 games, the offense has sputtered. Like I want to get back to everything clicks. And I think the catalyst of doing that is finding a way to limit those turnovers because I don't think the defensive acumen to force takeaways is going to vanish. But if they can just have one less turnover per game, I really do think they can win a playoff game.
What do you think that it would take for KOC to bench Sam Darnold? Like, do you
Okay.
think it was
Mhm.
even on his mind on Sunday?
Well, if it is, he lied because a reporter
Well,
asked him, "Was there a moment when you considered Nick Mullens?" He said, "Not one." What would it take? It would probably take another. So winning masks a lot. They won 12-7. He kind of gets a mulligan. I mean, Jared Goff threw 5 picks Sunday night, and not a single person asked Dan Campbell, "Hey, are you switching quarterbacks?"
mm-mm. Right.
Brock Purdy has thrown 3 interceptions, 0 touchdowns twice since last December. Nobody cares.
Hmm.
Darnold is just held to a different standard because he's Darnold. So what would it take? It would probably take the Titans game this week. They throw 3 picks, and it causes them a loss. And then you get into
Hmm.
the Bears game, and he's on his bullshit and throws another 2 by halftime. That's
Yeah.
when I think you would see Mullens. We have a unique head coach who's went through the quarterback journey himself. And
Yep.
if you want somebody to be benched, this isn't the right head coach for you. I mean, he's an eternal optimist, and I believe Aaron Jones, who says, this guy's going to bounce back and he's going to show you. He told Kay Adams that yesterday. I believe we're going to see the good version of Darnold before too long, but I will note the Titans defense is markedly better than the Jaguars.
I you're so right with the Kevin O'Connell argument. I see no scenario in which he benches Sam Darnold unless he's committed to that for the entirety of
Mm-hmm.
the season because he knows, like you just said, he's experienced these kind of things firsthand. He knows how it gets in his head, and he knows Sam better than anybody and how that would affect him. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't see a scenario where that happens. I see so much discourse about JJ McCarthy, and people are so upset that JJ is not here. And it's extremely frustrating to me because A, it's extremely presumptuous that you assume that JJ would have this team in this position right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then that he would come in when they benched Sam this game, which is what everyone wanted, and then he would lead the team to victory and not throw any picks. I understand people are excited for JJ McCarthy. They want to see him. We all do. But I don't know how you go with the narrative that this would be a completely different scenario. And I don't know if Kevin O'Connell would have even benched him for JJ in that moment because if you make that decision, you have to stick with it. And they're
Yeah.
7-2. So unless you're seeing something from JJ McCarthy in practice that is night and day above what Sam is doing, I don't see him doing it. What do you think?
I think the McCarthy chatter right now is soulless. We need to think like, all right, if he does this again or he already did this before, at least this isn't our long-term fix. I think that's why the chatter has bubbled to the surface is because we want to make sure, we want to tell ourselves that this isn't the standard of Vikings football. We've got the guy waiting who won't do this bullshit.
Yeah.
I think that's why this has become so prevalent. It's also worth noting that in an alternate universe, this would be the time when we'd start to chirp like if McCarthy had been
Yes.
chilling the entire season and Vikings are 7-2, when a guy throws 3 picks in the red zone, that is when you start to daydream about the other guy. Right now, it happens to be Nick Mullens, and there probably isn't that much of an upgrade. But I think this would be the natural tipping point for a lot of us to say, let's have a peek at McCarthy, especially if this happens again. But I agree with you completely that while we have this really rosy version of McCarthy from one preseason game, it's
Hmm.
unlikely that he would have played that well. I mean, if he did, great, but it's unlikely
Hmm.
that it would be this smooth sailing because if it was, we'd probably have one of the best quarterback prospects in history. If the Vikings were 7-2 and he had thrown what are we at 17 touchdowns, whatever Darnold's at, or is it still at 14? I can't remember. I don't fault fans for thinking about what the pedestal, like, yep, no, we got a guy in the waiting,
Hmm.
so this is not how we usually do things. But it's moot. Like it doesn't really
Hmm.
matter if you think
Yeah.
McCarthy would be different because he's not coming back this year. But I will say
Right.
that it's really cool, and Sally and I we asked for this even during the kind of some of the good parts of the Cousins there were like, we wish we had a guy waiting, and we finally do, and that's really cool.
It's the most excited that we've been in forever because we haven't had this. We had it with Teddy Bridgewater, obviously, but that only lasted Matt Castle finished one entire game. No, 2.5, I think, before Teddy came in. And then obviously we know what happened with Christian Ponder. So this is the most excited we have been for a quarterback in a long time. So I don't fault them either. I just think that if they had 4 or 5 wins and they were in that situation on Sunday, then I could see them putting in JJ. But they are putting in JJ, but sorry, I just saw Dave in the chat and I got distracted. However, 7-2, you know, they do need Detroit to fumble a little bit to be able to take over that divisional spot. But I don't see them making that move just at 7-2. Maybe in a couple games, but not in that game on Sunday.
One thing I thought of that I want to pound home before we get to the next topic is a lot of times on shows like these or in stuff that I write or you and I texting about the Vikings, we always talk about how this is kind of a free season because we didn't expect to be good. I will tell you the Vikings do not feel that way. They're not saying like, well, hey, we didn't expect to be good, so let's just see how it goes. Right. They are committed to going to win a Super Bowl. And so while we can kind of logically work through the house money angle of this season, the Vikings players, coaches, even probably Kwesi, like, why else would you trade for Cam Robinson? These guys absolutely believe that they can go win a Super Bowl, and that's also pretty damn exciting. You have the defense to do it. I will say that.
Dave did give an update. 10 picks was the answer. But yeah, let's talk about the defense. Blake Cashman was back. What a difference he made. They are 5-0 with Blake Cashman in the lineup. Talk a little bit about his return and what that meant for this defense on Sunday.
Yeah, his linebacker record is undefeated. So yeah, I didn't wholesale buy into the narrative that he was this almighty god that made the defense what it is, but he is a severely important contributor because let's just face it, he's more of a playmaker than Grugier Hill, and he's better in pass coverage. The reason that we like Blake Cashman so much compared to last year, Jordan Hicks was not a bad football player, but he didn't quite cover the pass like Blake Cashman does. And you might recall last year, the Vikings ranked 32nd in completion percentage allowed. The game that always stands out to me was that damn Chargers game in week 3 where every pass was to Keenan Allen. You just saw it coming. The guy had like 200 yards. They couldn't do anything to stop it. Well, you have Cashman here because his coverage is markedly better than Ivan Pace's and than Jordan Hicks. So I agree to an extent that I agree wholeheartely the defense is optimal when Cashman is there. I just don't think that he was the one thing that makes the defense tick. It wasn't long ago in September where the Vikings were beating the Texans and the 49ers asses with replacement players, and it didn't matter who was out. So I'm very glad that Cashman's back. But I pumped the brakes a little bit on saying that he's like the Michael Jordan of the defense.
I agree with you. It was, of course, nice to have him back, but that has been, the feeling from a lot of people. And I think that is what is the beauty of Flores' defense is that he is now that he has the guys that he wanted to acquire. He is supposed to be able to mix in guys that can play different positions and be able to still make things happen. However, such a relief to have him back going into, especially, going into these 2 more road games in 3 in a row, which is tough. No matter what competition you're playing, it's tough. It's not ideal, but it's great to have him back. We've got Byron Murphy with interceptions 3 games in a row. Beautiful. But what do you see going forward? Oh, let's talk about the kicker first. Let's talk about the kicker. The MVP of the game got the game ball. That was a huge relief as well because it was pretty much unknown. How is he going to do? It's his first NFL game. And one of those was a little bit wobbly, so it was a little scary. But other than that, he nailed, he was 4 for 4.
So I want to start off by saying, before I get into my Parker Romo speech, we are so goddamn due for this, for a kicking stretch where everything, I don't know if we were confident, where everything ended up great. We went through, minus the Ryan Longwell era, at least 25 years of apprehension, doldrums, like snake-bitten tendencies. So as a historian or a statistician, it was due to eventually even out and get good just out of sheer like mathematics of draft picks and signings. And so I tweeted about a week ago today, what if John Parker Romo is a baller as well? Because I think the score has to be even up throughout Vikings history. And it's really cool that he got the nod. And I mean, they didn't ask him to kick, from 50, but he had a new long snapper, and that's never fun. But not long ago in March, Sally, Parker Romo was the solution. They said no thanks to Greg Joseph. That guy went and signed with the Packers, couldn't win a job there. And we had Parker Romo, so I was doing all my homework. I'm like, all right, let's see what this is. I didn't think they'd draft a kicker. So somehow we're at the best of both worlds, where maybe Parker Romo just dazzles, and then when Reichard's back, obviously the choice is Reichard. But think about the dialogue to have of too many good kickers, or hey, these guys don't even miss. One single miss by Parker Romo, which should have been expected, would have changed the entire landscape of that game. So for longtime Vikings fans who've been witnessing some of the notable kicking emergencies or gaffes, it's really cool to have a season that's kind of afloat because kickers are making their kicks. And I think deep in our heart of hearts, we're still like, oh God. When the guy trots up. With Reichard, I was starting not to feel that. With Romo, every single kick, I was like, he's going to miss one. I know it's not even going to be his fault. Like, he's not supposed to be perfect. But generally speaking, it's even if it only lasts for this season, I think it'll be more persistent and consistent because Reichard's a baller. But it's so cool to say we're the team that can kick well.
And that's another theme of the season is that, okay, wow, maybe now we're going to have a little bit of a kicking controversy. Obviously, like you said, they're going to go with Will when he comes back, but it's good to know that they do have another guy that they can count on. And at the beginning of the season, September, we had to have the whole discourse about, oh my God, now look at this beautiful problem. We have two good quarterbacks.
Yeah.
and where are we going to go from here? Whereas in the past, we have had neither of those situations.
The last thing about Romo, because he'll be the kicker for the next 3 games, is that dude can hit from distance. He's not like some like Morton Anderson who could only hit from like 38 towards the end of his career. No, just because Parker Romo isn't a household name, that doesn't mean he can't blast it from 55 or 60. So the Vikings will eventually call on him, especially because he was perfect last week. And we don't necessarily have to close our eyes if he gets lined up from 56 or 57. Every NFL kicker hits them now, and so can Parker Romo.
Well, that's good to know because I was not aware of that. So I'm happy that you did all your research in the off season. All right, well, you have to get going. So let's just talk about the Titans really quickly. How do you see this game panning out?
Well, I'm not gonna walk into this one big chested like last week when I was all like everything was lining up for a Vikings blowout. I had my reverse jinx tweet all out there. I think they will prevail, but because of what I watched against Jacksonville, where they should have lost, if they would have played a team like the Chiefs or the Lions, they would have been eaten for lunch with all of those interceptions. But I don't think that we will see an exact redo, like, oh my God, here come all the fumbles and interceptions. I think that this game will feel like more of a normal Vikings win. I am a little nervous because the Titans defense is about 10 times better than the Jaguars per their performance this year. So it's not a great to get right game against an otherwise lousy team. The one thing they're good at is defense. And the one thing that's struggling right now for the Vikings is their offensive turnovers. But once I get into my bag later this week, thinking about, what's going to happen, I'll say that I predict ultimately the Vikings win about 27-17. And they're going to get that record to 8-2. Somehow the Bears, I haven't watched a Bears game in like 3 weeks, but evidently they're in utter disarray. And I'm old enough to remember when they were the sexiest thing there was at 4-2. And from afar, from Twitter, I've had to watch their plunge, which is glorious. But I thought they were trending up, and it seems like everything is rotten there, which I fully endorse. And we just have this really winnable slate of games up until probably, I'm sure at Seattle won't be fun, but the Packers and Lions at the end of the season, it was really cool that the Vikings were good when the hard part of their schedule was on the agenda, because everybody thought it'd be the reverse. We'd be 1-5 or some shit, start rattling off these wins against bad teams. But you have this cushion of 7-2, which is a remarkable cushion. I think they beat the Titans by 10. I don't think it'll be as anxietal as the Jaguars game. And then bada bing, you can go to Soldier Field, which will be another ugly game.
They just fired their offensive coordinator, correct? The Bears
Hmm.
did, and same. They were so hyped up that first month, and then I don't know why I keep getting all these Bears fans and Bears writers in my feed. Thanks, Elon. But yeah, they're totally crumbling. They're
Well, you know
having a
what happened
meltdown.
is they started playing real opponents. A lot of
Hmm.
their success was against teams that were mid or at least defenses that weren't good. Well, they came back to reality and started playing some good teams. And I kept thinking that when they were 4-2, but I didn't have the balls to tweet it because I didn't want the backlash or I didn't want to be wrong. But it appears that they were kind of like, who was it? I think it was Darnold and the Panthers like 3 years ago started 3-0, and we're like, hey, Darnold's back, and that was only because they had played really shitty teams. I think the same thing happened to the Bears over a 6-game sample.
Yeah, their last few games haven't even been close.
Hmm.
They haven't been able to do anything. But yeah, I think that they will also win this week against the Titans. I agree it's going to be close. I think it might be a little more anxiety inducing than you are predicting. I hope I'm incorrect about that, but I can see it going that way. But thank you, Dustin, so much for joining me. Check out Dustin here on YouTube at Vikes Now. And Dustin, we will chat with you soon.
Yeah, let's do it again in a couple weeks, maybe at 9-2 or so. Really start peeking at that postseason picture, which you notoriously hate to do prematurely.
Hey, with this team, like it's all house money to me. So I'm ready. I'm willing to talk about it. The expectations were so low for me that I'm just having fun. I don't believe in jinxing this team. They
Yeah,
the Kirk Cousins seasons and all that. I didn't feel that way, but it's all fun.
I agree. All right, we'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
See ya.
Like, subscribe, and ring the bell. And rate us on your favorite aggregator. And a big shout out goes to Sal and her guests on this Vikings First and SKOL production, partnered with the Fans First Sports Network. Thanks, everyone, and SKOL.